You're watching Beyond Markets, where we bring you up to speed on development outcomes in Africa. I'm Kenneth Igbomor, and thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Coming up on Beyond Markets today, we'll discuss how cities can be more sustainable in a post-COVID-19 world. You can join the conversations and let us know what you think. The hashtag to use is Beyond Markets. You can also hit me up on my hashtag, on my handle, that's at Kenneth Igbomor. Now, a group of 96 cities around the world known as the C40 Cities have released an agenda where they outline some steps which they hope will deliver an equitable and sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and end fossil fuel subsidies. Hastings Chikoko is the Regional Director for Africa for the C40 Cities Climate Leadership, and he joins me now to discuss this agenda. Thank you so much for your time, Hastings. And let's first get into what sort of impact we've seen the pandemic pull on the continent so far.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually disrupted a number of sectors in African cities. And of course, what is concerning at the moment is there is a feeling that this is just calm before the storm. We are not yet sure what to expect. Of course, the cases are still going up. The projections are still pointing to increased cases in Africa. But that being the case, we are still, we have noticed really impact, especially on the economy. The city economy, no matter which city you are in, has been impacted. First, of course, it's because of low productivity in cities. Just some cities had to really implement measures to slow down infection. And in some cities, it was a hard lockdown. In other cities, there were some form of restriction. But whichever form they took, there was still some impact in production in those cities. But also, the city economy is impacted because also of the redirecting resources that were meant for other economic activities, development activities, towards the emergency, addressing the emergency. So that's also another area. The other impact is really just to deal with the inequalities in our cities. So we have seen that some of the sectors in the city, or some of the pockets in the city, or some of the settlements in the cities have not been able to cope as was expected, especially the informal settlements, the poor neighborhoods. It has been really a challenge for them to adhere to safety measures like sanitation measures because of access to water. So those areas have been really worse affected, but also there have been issues around access to food. So that has also been an area where cities have moved in swiftly to see how they can provide food to the residents. Of course, in African cities, we also have issues of homeless people, and there we also have had some challenges to basically support them effectively for them to remain safe and to slow down infections. So those are some of the areas that I can highlight at the moment. Of course, the main thing that, of course, the report that has been launched has highlighted is the loss of jobs. Every African city has actually lost some jobs. Of course, with the background that we already had higher rates in some cities of unemployment, this has just been worsening the already undesirable situation.
All right, Hastings, no doubt the economic impact definitely of the COVID-19 pandemic on cities cannot be easily surmounted. But let's get into the agenda now that you are pushing through. I understand that the mayors have come together and are putting together this recovery plan, and I would like you to give us some of the details.
Yes, so the C40 mayors, 96 cities, have released a bold commitment on how to address post-COVID recovery. I think this is really the recognition that cities or mayors are on the front line of this pandemic. Most of the epicenters that we have, COVID epicenters, they are in cities, and understandably so, because these are nodes of mobility. These are also areas where we have large populations. So this agenda is basically premised on the fact that we must do things differently. Business as usual will not help us. COVID has taught us a big lesson, and going forward, we need to build back better. I think that's the buzzword for today. We need to build back better. We don't need to repeat the mistakes of the past. And for this particular agenda, the mayors are hoping to have a low carbon future, and are hoping to also have a resilient future going forward. Resilient from future pandemics, but also looking at resilience from other emergencies, including climate change. So the agenda is.
All right, now let's stick on this area of climate change.
Yes.
Hastings, let's stick to this area of climate change you just mentioned, and definitely a lot to do with getting cities to be more responsible with low carbon emissions. And I see that you are demanding an end to fossil fuel subsidies.
That's right. So we would like to ensure that as we recover from COVID-19, as governments are arranging economic stimulus, that stimulus must be green. As we try to reinvest in cities or boost investments in cities, we are asking for green investments. And we are doing this because we believe that the pandemic and other emergencies or vulnerabilities that we have, they stem from poor relationship between human and the planet and the ecological systems. So we would like to ensure that going forward, all human footprint that affects the ecological systems is minimized. So we are looking at investing in clean energy. We are looking at investing in clean mobility. We are also looking at opportunities for green jobs, even as we replenish the jobs that we are losing now. We need to focus on green jobs. But we're also really looking at some areas that have been problematic, especially in African cities, like our solid waste management systems. So we would like to have an economy that is circular, an economy that reuses its waste where waste has to be produced. But also we are hoping for an economy that minimizes production of waste. So only produce that which can be consumed. And this is important for Africa, given that our cities are growing, given that Africa is the fastest urbanizing region.
All right, it's good that the plan has been articulated, but I would like to know, and let's break it down to the barest minimum, what exactly you would like cities to do in specific terms?
Great. So in specific terms, I'll pick sector by sector. So in specific terms, let's look at mobility. We need to redefine how we move, how we travel. First, we need to ensure that we minimize the demand for mobility. So as we plan our cities, the African city of the future should be that which is compact. In the report that has been launched, they are talking about a 15-minute city, but it's a city, it's an ideal city where someone can actually access all the services that he or she desires within a travel distance of 15 minutes. So let's design and plan our cities that people can live closer to where they need to get their services, whether it's place of employment, whether it's shopping, to minimize carbon emissions from the transportation sector. We are also hoping to transition to clean energy in African cities. There is opportunity for renewable energy, and we need to begin to transition to that, a departure from dependence on fossil fuels. And this will require policies in cities that in countries that decentralize the energy sector, to ensure that there is energy production at the municipality level or at the city level. But we also need to look at technology. I've talked about energy, I've talked about transport. Besides just planning, we also need to look at the technology that we are using in these cities. For example, in the transport sector, we may need to look at, we should look at low emission vehicles. We need to look at low emission buses that are not propelled from fossil fuels, but looking at alternative energy. On the waste sector, I would like us to focus on the infrastructure. So we need to invest in infrastructure that facilitates waste collection, logistics around waste, but also infrastructure for waste disposal. So we need to see sanitary landfills in our cities, so that waste that has to be produced should actually be managed properly to minimize emissions from the landfills. But all this, we also need to look at the opportunities for job creation. So we need to work with other players like labor unions to see how we can use these opportunities, transition, how we can use it to create jobs, to actually replenish the jobs that we have lost, but also to upskill the workers, especially those that are in informal employment, to upskill them so that they can get more permanent and reliable jobs, because that's one area that we have learned from COVID-19 that needs attention.
All right, Hastings, I need you to hold that thought for a second. I will take a quick break. When we return, definitely we'll get to hear more about your future for African cities. I've been speaking to Hastings Chikoko. He's the Regional Director for Africa for the C40 Cities Climate Leadership. Beyond Market continues after the break. Welcome back to Beyond Market. Today joining us, my guest has been Hastings Chikoko. He's the Regional Director for Africa at the C40's Climate Leadership. And before the break, he was painting a picture for us on what that future post-COVID-19 should look like. We're talking about, specific terms in what the C40's agenda is planning to achieve. And Hastings, and I'd like you to continue on this trend and continue to let's look at that new normal you're looking at for post-COVID-19 in Africa.
Thank you so much. So the new normal in Africa should focus on a number of areas, and I want to start with resilience. So we need to see resilient cities in Africa. And when I talk about resilience, I want to break that down. First of course, we are talking about ecological resilience. So we need to ensure that we have put in place mechanisms that actually safeguards the African cities from some hazards that are coming from extreme natural processes or extreme weather events. For us to do this, there is a need for us to extensively understand and map the hazards and vulnerabilities that face our cities, and of course put in place early warning systems in cities, and have a plan to address that. The second, of course, is the social resilience, and this is where the current pandemic also was, where we look at our health systems, where we look at the public services that we have, and how we can strengthen the social and public services to be able to have communities that are safe from future pandemics. COVID-19 has exposed that there are some situations that we can find ourselves in, and that will need water, but that will need adequate sanitation. Right now, in some cases, we're not able to do that. From now onwards, we need to learn from COVID-19 and improve our infrastructure for water, infrastructure for sanitation. We have cities like Freetown that have already begun programs to bring safe water and adequate water in settlements that are in poor settlements through rainwater harvesting and everything. Then the future should also look at healthy. How do we minimize underlying conditions? COVID-19 affected more those people that had underlying conditions, and we need to ensure that we have a healthy population by focusing on air quality when it comes to respiratory diseases. So programs that can improve air quality in African cities should be given emphasis. When you look at the studies from the World Health Organization, air quality in Africa is a big problem, and we need to address that. We also need to deal with urban heat. It's a health hazard that also contributes to the fatalities under COVID-19. So the future should look at those vulnerabilities in Africa.
Quite an interesting picture you paint there with this new normal post-COVID-19, Hastings. But I'd like to get to the work ahead for this recovery task force that is charged with delivering these outcomes.
So going forward, the commitment has been made. And the work ahead is to make sure that the commitment translates to action. And at the moment, cities are in the process of developing their recovery plans, COVID-19 recovery plans. And we want to ensure that the principles and the guidance provided by the work of the C40 Mayoral Task Force are actually integrated in the recovery plans. So they'll be worked and reviewing plans and making sure that we have good plans in place. For example, the city of Durban has just developed their economic recovery plan. And it has really integrated COVID-19. It has integrated the fact that there has been a drop in the city's direct spending of 300 million rands. So the economic recovery is taking that into consideration. It is taking into consideration the fact that city of Durban has lost 320,000 jobs, and the recovery plan has to reverse that. So helping cities integrate the aspirations of this agenda into their plans, but also looking at how those plans are going to be implemented. So this will focus on mobilizing financing for those plans. I just said earlier on that some resources, some financial resources from cities have been reallocated to the emergency. How do we fill the gap? Some of the ratepayers or taxpayers have not been able to to pay their taxes, thereby cities have lost revenue. How do we fill the gap? So a big focus on financing, establishing partnerships with other institutions that can support cities with financing. Then the last area of focus is to just really make sure that we have the requisite capacity, technical capacity to deliver. We have the best science. We are connected to the best experts. COVID-19 has shown us that we need to pay attention to what experts say. So we need to make sure that we have the best science available for us to move forward in a different way, guided by science and not emotions and not political posturing, but doing the right things at the right time. So those are some of the areas that I see as focusing on going forward, guided by this agenda that the mayoral task force has put in place.
Definitely quite a lot to do there as you look to, carry out this strategy and implement it with bearing in mind integrating the guiding principles of the C40. But I would like to know how you plan to ensure that no one is left behind as you implement this plan.
Thank you for that question. That's a very good question. I think a big lesson from COVID-19 again has been the fact that we haven't been moving forward together. We were leaving some segments of our city residents behind, and we want to correct that. So the mayors have embraced the notion or principle of inclusion. In C40, we call it inclusive climate action. And we are making that also an integral part of our journey post-COVID. So we intend to ensure that there are mechanisms in place to work with other players that can help cities mobilize all different groups, marginalized groups, be it the youth, women, informal settlements, or really workers, but all sectors or all segments of society are included. So through this, we are seeking partnerships with civil society groups that work in different thematic areas. We are also seeking partnerships with labor unions to just make sure that the transition that we are talking about in this agenda is just, does take into account the interests of workers. And as we have said, job creation is a big piece here. The transition should ensure that it's creating jobs. So it is about partnerships. We need to move with the research institutions as well to make sure that they provide the insights that we need to take informed decisions going forward. So we are creating stakeholder platforms that can facilitate that inclusive approach to addressing COVID-19, but also looking into the future, inclusive approach for COVID recovery.
All right, Hastings, but talking about collaborations and partnership, on your charge for a low-carbon recovery post-COVID-19, I would like to know the kind of feedback you've been getting from national governments.
Right, so there is need for lots of conversations to actually reach consensus on a number of issues. But I think to begin with, the commitment is there. Remember, this journey towards low carbon economy is guided by some frameworks that are out there, like the Paris Agreement, the New Urban Agenda. These are global frameworks that actually guide what needs to be done. And most governments have committed to that. I think where conversations need to happen is what should be done to actually achieve the aspirations or the commitments that have been made. So there we need to have discussions, to have more insights into the discussions. I think one of the areas that we need to address is the recognition that Africa, when you look at emission profile of Africa in terms of carbon emissions, is not the highest emitter. There are other regions that are emitting more than Africa. So sometimes there is complacence in taking action, but we need to change that mindset, because much as Africa has the lowest emission profile, Africa is home to the fastest growing economies. And Africa has defined a robust development agenda. And Africa is one of the fast urbanizing regions. So all these require that the direction that we take in terms of development does not repeat the mistakes that those that have developed before us made. So we may have a low emissions profile now, but given the direction we have taken, we need to do it better. We need to follow a low carbon development pathway. I think that's the conversation that we need to take. We need to understand that a low carbon pathway does not mean no development. We can grow our economies. We can address poverty. We can progress in Africa without necessarily having high emissions in the region. We can do it better. We can do it clean, and we can be green.
All right, then, Hastings, finally, very quickly, and on business, though, I'd like to get what your charge is for the business community, especially on delivering on the ESG outcomes, and also on the investment side. When you look at the rise of sustainable finance models we've seen recently, especially with the green bonds, I'd like to know if the C40 is looking this way to finance their future initiatives.
Yes, so as I said earlier on, we need to have partnerships with many players, and that includes business. We have in C40 a Cities and Business Climate Alliance, where we are trying to look at different private sector players and see how they can contribute to the agenda. And we see the business sector playing a role in a number of areas. The first is on the technology. So most of the technologies that we need, we rely on the business sector, on the private sector, to basically make them available. So we really are there to ensure that, for example, if we are looking for buses, to ensure that the business sector is providing clean buses. So engaging in that kind of discussion, co-creating solutions with cities to ensure that we are moving together. The business sector is there to also help in driving the innovation that cities need. So really coming to the same table and really discussing cutting-edge solutions to city problems. Of course, the business sector, as you have rightly said, we have financial institutions there. So trying to also work with the banking sector to see what sort of packages they can put together to actually ensure that we unlock financing for some of the activities that we are talking about. So these are some of the conversations that C40 is having with business. And we have a number of platforms at the moment, globally and also in Africa, where this engagement is taking place. And as we move forward with the economic COVID-19 economic recovery, we see business playing a key role. And I encourage all mayors in Africa to create space for business, because sometimes there are these silos that are created. The business sector creating a silo, as well as the cities, the mayors themselves. We want to bring down those silos. We want to bring the divisions and make sure that we are confronting the problem collaboratively. That's also what COVID-19 has taught us. It has taught us that national government, state government, provincial government, cities, and business, and all other players, we need to hold hands and approach the challenges before us collaboratively.
All right, then. Thank you so much for your time. Definitely a lot of collaboration needed there to forge ahead as we move ahead in the post-COVID-19 world. I've been speaking to Hastings Chikoko. He's the Regional Director for Africa for the C40 Climate Leadership. And that's it on Beyond Markets for this episode today. Definitely quite a lot to think about there when you look at how cities are forging ahead. But thank you so much for joining us. And remember, you can catch the show at 5 p.m. West Africa time daily and have access to all episodes of Beyond Markets on our website. That's at cnbcafrica.com. You can also hit me up. The hashtag to use on the show is Beyond Markets, and my handle is @Kenneth Igbomor. From me and the team, have a wonderful day.